Hey everybody, it is Saturday morning at 9:24 a.m. I just took the dogs out to our long morning park walk and we came back. It's pretty cold out there. I think it's like 45 degrees or something like that. Maybe probably like, yeah, like in the low 40s, which, in Fahrenheit. But this is my use it or lose it channel. Kind of the idea of this channel is that we people in America in the U.S. we have this right. I believe it's the First Amendment right to talk. That's one of these things we have, and if we don't talk, we will. If we don't use that right, it's just like any muscle. That muscle will go away. And a lot of times, like I once watched this. I used to like to really enjoyed watching this YouTube channel called Bald and Broke. It was about this guy. He would just travel all around the world and stuff. And I would literally just like go to YouTube every day and watch one of his videos. And I really enjoyed them. And at one point, he was talking about he was going through the Ukraine, and when he was going through the Ukraine, basically one of his running themes was that life when they were with under Russian control was better than life under the current control because, and this is 10 years ago or so, maybe 5 years ago. It was definitely before the pandemic. And, but life afterwards, because of the corruption of the government, it was so corrupt. And then I actually had a boss at one point who was like, he was from the Ukraine, and he was telling me all these horrible stories about like how his brother had gone to like everyone has to do mandatory boot camp, and then when his brother came back from boot camp, he ended up dying from internal bleeding because there was a hanger inside of him. So he had been tortured during boot camp and all that, and so he was like, if I hadn't come to the United States as a child, I probably would be dead too. And then Russia invaded Ukraine, and suddenly I could not find that bald and broke on YouTube anymore. He was just gone. And he'd only done like he had like 8 or 9 years of videos on there, but like that he was in Ukraine I think for 6 months, and basically he was just wiped out. Could just because of those videos where he wasn't saying the popular thing at the time. And then my boss, that was weird because he was all over like LinkedIn bemoaning the fact that his wonderful Ukrainian government was under attack, and I was just like, okay, this is weird. But my only point on that is that like some of the things that we talk about that are no big deal to talk about today may not be stuff that you could talk about tomorrow. But if there's a ton of us talking about things today that maybe the authorities don't want us talking about tomorrow, maybe they won't take that away from us. Because like if YouTube had just been littered with thousands and thousands or millions of videos from all around the world of people talking about corruption in Ukraine, they probably wouldn't have thrown off that bald and broke dude. So it's important that we talk about things that maybe in the future will be, maybe not appropriate, but if enough of us talk about them in the future, they will stay appropriate. And so the thing I want to talk about today is specifically from a technical perspective, test-driven development. But I definitely want to talk in a more general way about sort of what I think is happening with test-driven development. And the first thing I'll bring up is football. So my kids played football. My sons both played football in sixth, seventh, and eighth grade, and one of them played sixth, seventh, eighth, and ninth grade. And they were both very, very good football players. They both were given many honors. Most one of them was most valuable player 2 times in a row in seventh and eighth grade, and he was an all-star. The a city or county all-star where he got to play in a big all-star game with all the best players. And then the other one, they actually invented an MVP for him because he was an offensive lineman. It's very difficult to become a most valuable player from that position, even though the offensive line is by far the most valuable part of any football team. Um, but he was an offensive lineman. They actually made an MVP award for his eighth grade year called the most versatile player because run. He would also run the ball a few times. He maybe during his eighth grade season he ran like 6 times as a running back, like on third and short or fourth and short situations. He went out and they would just he was a big strong boy and he would just run it over. It was kind of a power play. But anyways, the thing about football, one of the things that is it's an incredible sport, and the people that play it sort of can often become extremely bonded to each other because they go through like a bunch of shared traumas in football practice and football games and stuff like that. So sometimes a team will play well beyond, like it just is way more as an individual team than it is as a collection of individuals. Like they play like they are full of all-stars, even though individually none of them are all-stars. And that will happen. And one of the things that you'll see sometimes, just a beautiful thing, is like the team will start to walk on to take a field in a very important game, and then they'll just like, for no reason, just start holding hands with each other. No one can really explain it. They just like become one. They just become a single unit, and it's just this beautiful thing. It's hard to, if you've ever actually seen it happen, it's hard to not even tear up. And on top of that, I think if you were ever part of something like that, which I've never been part of something like that, but if you were ever part of something like that, I think that tends to be like maybe one of the very pinnacle highlight things of your life if that happens and all that. Well, a lot of times what will happen is a coach will actually force the team to hold hands. So he's like, and when you guys walk onto the field, you better all hold hands. That is not the same. Okay, forcing the team, it's not the fact that they held hands, it's the fact that they wanted to hold hands. It's the fact that something took them over and just literally took control of the team that made them part of something that was bigger than themselves as an individual. And so they all hold hands, but some coaches will be like, I want you to hold hands when you go out there. And that totally defeats the purpose. So that is the thing. And I think test-driven development is a similar thing. So I'm going to ask about, if you don't know, test-driven development is the situation where you write unit tests for your code, and then you write the code. So you write a bunch of tests you imagine what the code's going to be, then you write the tests for it, and then you start writing the code, and then the tests start to pass. And a lot of people are strong proponents of this. So I'm just going to say a lot of people strongly advocate TDD. And I'm thinking TDD can only be test-driven development. We'll see. Okay, so yeah, it has a strong following, especially among developers who prioritize maintainability and reliability. The idea of writing tests before writing the actual implementation forces you to think about the requirements and expected behavior up front. That said, while TDD can be great for certain types of applications, especially back-end service, APIs, and libraries, it can feel cumbersome in highly UI-driven projects. Front-end development, particularly with frameworks like Angular, often involves complex interactions, asynchronous behaviors, and DOM manipulations, making strict TDD tricky. Some developers, especially in the JavaScript TypeScript world, prefer a more programmatic approach, writing the tests after a feature is implemented rather than before, but still ensuring good coverage. Do you use test TDD in Angular projects, or do you take a more flexible approach? So I do. I think that's exactly just a really well way to state sort of the the people, the the thought, the way the people that advocate TDD, that's perfect. That's the perfect way of saying what they believe. Now, and I will say, just a little side note, I do think that we don't necessarily know what's offensive and what's not offensive. So when you have an idea and a thought that's complex, if you one of the biggest strengths of these large language model things, systems, is that it can take your words and then kind of spit back to you exactly what you think, but in a much softer, much smarter way than the way you put it. So like, I like that. I don't that, and a lot of people complain about that because you think that you're getting the truth from a large language model, but you really aren't. What you're getting is an analysis of a million ways of saying what you think, and then it repeats to you what you think in the best, well-written way that it can be. But if you were to have, if you had the opposite belief, it would tell you the opposite belief. It's not. You should not believe anything any more strongly because you read, because you talked to a large language model and said, wrote something in there, and then it told you were right, or and if it tells you you're wrong, then that shows just deep manipulation within the system. But you should just use it as a way to sort of clean up your thought process, but not, you shouldn't use it as a way to confirm your thought process. At least that's my opinion. But anyways, so that's not what this is about, but I do think that's important. I don't believe that test driven development makes code more maintainable or reliable. I believe that systems that are predictable and reliable, like if you can effectively do test driven development, then that means that you have a system that can be reliably predicted and redone, not the other way around. It doesn't make things predictable and redoable, replicable. It is a side effect of having a system that can be replicated. So I'm just going to put that into. So I don't think. So I'm going to say I think that TDD works very well if developing code that is solutions that are replicable. But if you force TDD, then it defeats the purpose. Developers that work in a system that is replicable, system that provides solutions that are replicable, will naturally become TDD, will naturally enjoy TDD development in a way. Forcing TDD is like putting the horse in front of the cart. So that makes a lot of sense. TDD thrives when a problem domain is well defined and the solutions are predictable, like building reusable libraries, APIs, business logic that follow clear rules. In those cases, writing tests first can guide development effectively and ensure consistency. But forcing TDD in situations where exploration, iteration, and discovery are key, like UI development or complex integrations, can slow things down and even stifle creativity. It's like demanding a blueprint before you even know what you're building. Okay, so that was a brilliant. Wherever it found that piece, and whoever wrote that piece was freaking genius. That's exactly what it is. That was an amazing analogy. In those cases, a more flexible approach like writing tests after stabilizing a feature makes a lot more sense. I've seen teams get bogged down trying to follow TD dogmatically, only to end up rewriting tests as requirements shift. It feels more natural when developers adopt it when it actually adds value rather than testing it as a universal rule. So yeah, that's exactly right. Now we can kind of step back out of like technical world. So I once worked at a place where the vice president, he was very charismatic, very very brilliant. I mean, just freaking brilliant. He he went. He was showing somebody, like walking through the walking on the floor where all the developers were, where all of us developers were, and he pointed out a workstation that where somebody was off. He was one of the architects. He was a young UI architect who he was a Georgia Tech grad and was super super smart, very very charismatic young man, and he just had a flair for like saying things like "this will end in tears" and things like that. And he was funny, like you would really enjoy being in a meeting with him and all that. But he had one of his monitors. He had a desktop or a laptop, and then he had two monitors, and one of them was like vertical, and one of them was horizontal, which I don't like that personally because I think it encourages long functions. I like horizontal layout because I don't want if that's sort of an indicator to me that my functions are too long if they don't all fit on the horizontal thing. But anyways, so this VP, he was like pointing this out, and he was loudly saying, "See, this is how we could tell if somebody is a really good developer. That's one of our tells. If they have one of their monitors like this." And the next day, literally the next day, every developer had their monitor set up that way. And then I believe he was like a couple days later, he had investors walking through, and they saw that all the monitors are that way. Like, did all those developers become elite developers because they changed the configuration of their monitors? No, they did not. They were the exact same developer, and like to make it even less technical. And the point I'm trying to make is that like when you force results that generally come as a result of eliteness, when you force that, you've lost it. Like it's gone. The whole by forcing people to do something, you've literally just defeated the whole point of it. And one last one, which is sort of maybe on like a kind of a negative thing, is there used to be a TV show. I can't remember what it's called. It was like iRobot or iDeveloper, iCoder. I can't remember what it was, but it was about this really like brilliant software developer, and he had like a multiple personalities, and one of his personalities was like a hacker, and the hacker would get him in trouble, and then he'd have to try to do that out. And I started watching it. It's a good show. It's fun to watch. I don't think it's realistic at all, but it is very fun, good show, and it is very valuable if you're a good developer to watch it, because a lot of non-developers watch it and then they assume you're like that. So it's good to know how they assume, like they're assuming that you have some sort of multiple personality disorder or something like that, because honestly what we do seems very magical to people. But anyway, so this show's coming on. I had watched them all and all that, and then there's this guy I used to work with, and like he would every morning he always showed up 10 to 15 minutes late, somewhere between 2 and 30 minutes late in that round probably close to 15 minutes most of the time. And he would always walk in, like the whole place would be dead silent, right? So we had the old fashioned cubicles where, like, if you stood up, your head would go over the top of it, but like if you were sitting down, so you couldn't tell if somebody was in their desk, but then like something would happen and you'd see all the little gopher heads pop up, everyone looking to see what's going on. It was kind of funny, but anyways, the so he's walking through. He would walk through, and like a place would be dead quiet. Everybody was working, and he would have these loud conversations on his Bluetooth, and he would always be talking about like insanely personal things, like, I mean, just like stuff about his mom hooking up with people, and just these crazy things that just are just absolutely not appropriate for work, and so and then he would spend like the first half of the day up until noon talking to his buddy, and then that because the way our cubes worked is they were sort of divided up in floors with a hallway in the middle, so but you could see what your four mates could do, and then you were sort of on one side of the hall or the other, so then you had your really close person. So he would always talk to the other guy, and they would talk really loud about weird ass things. But one of the things they would talk about a lot was how he was progressing through the TV show. And there was one episode where the star says, "Oh, so he's talking about some other character." He's like, "Oh, you mean that guy who's the town douchebag that always talks on his Bluetooth really loud?" And this guy was talking about where he was, and I was like, oh my gosh, that scene, he's going to see that scene tonight, because he was watching like 2 episodes every night, and I was just like, man, it's going to be very interesting to see what he does tomorrow, because he's going to see that scene tonight, and like he really loved the show. And sure enough, the next morning, dead quiet. He wasn't talking in his Bluetooth when he walked in. And so 2 things that I take away. One is how programmable we are and how easy it is for the TV to change our behavior. So you really need to be careful when you're watching TV, because it is programming you. And yeah, it's very unpredictable what you might do with the wrong programming. But because it was shocking, there was just nothing you could do to make this guy quit doing this, and then he just sees it in one TV show and stops. But the other thing is the fact that he wasn't talking on his phone, on the Bluetooth, all loud, didn't make him not a douchebag. He was still a douchebag after that. He just didn't do that. Like these, and basically like everybody knew, oh man, this guy's a douchebag, because every morning he walks in, and now anybody who got hired after that didn't have that way of knowing that he was a douchebag. Now, it would have been nice if he would have said, oh man, I'm a douchebag. I maybe should change my view of the world right now. Like the way I view the world is sort of out of sync with how most people think people should view the world. That didn't change, because he did all kinds of douchebag stuff all day long. That was just kind of sort of the loudest and proudest of his douchebag behavior. So anyways, and then speaking of douchebag, I remember my daughter she had heard that on that show, and she did not think, it's a very, very crude word, but it isn't necessarily in that context. It's just like a jerk, a loud, obnoxious jerk. And so my daughter didn't know what an actual douchebag was. So she was talking to her coach, and she was like, yeah, that person's a real douchebag. And the coach is like, oh my God, what did you just say? And she's like, what? And then the coach explained to her, it was a female coach, and she explained to her what that was. And my daughter was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I said that. So, that's a funny thing too. But the point is like forcing people to do something that people or groups, or forcing people or groups to do something that groups do, isn't necessarily going to make them like those people and groups. So like giving somebody a gold medal doesn't make them a gold medal athlete. Like giving somebody the gold medal of like, it's just a gesture if you don't actually do it. Like if some guy wins the 100-yard dash in the Olympics, and then let's say he has a little brother who's in a wheelchair or something, and he takes that off off of his neck and puts it on his brother's neck. That's a beautiful symbolism, and it's a wonderful thing to do. No disrespect to that, but that doesn't make the kid in the wheelchair a gold medal 100-yard dasher. And we seem to not be willing to acknowledge that like um, when we start to force behaviors that we see in people or we see, then we haven't fixed anything. We haven't come even one step closer. We're actually farther from our goal. As a software manager, what you want is a way to build stuff in a reliable way so that so you can report up the line how long it's actually going to take to do something that's going to make the company achieve goals. But like, if your team, and if you have a team and you're like, you guys are getting tasks, and then and the tasks are happening and all that, and then your team suddenly starts doing TDD on their own and all that, that is like, you should feel good about that. You should be like, oh my gosh, that's great. If you force your team to do that, then you probably literally just handicapped your team from ever becoming and reaching the goals. And I think that is probably my biggest problem with agile, is it's trying to force behaviors that have been observed in teams that are good teams. But those behaviors aren't what made the team a good team. Those teams started doing those behaviors because they were a good team. Anyways, I don't think that's a big deal. Like what I just talked about, I don't think, other than maybe some vulgar words, I don't think it was a big deal. But it's crazy how talking about things like that in 2025 may very well be totally offensive in 2030. But like, if we've already talked about it and we worked through this stuff, and and all that as a society, and we have tons of stuff out there, then we've grown. And I think that's what the whole purpose of this web series is. And I guess I'm trying to work on dealing with an annoying bird behind me. And yeah, I don't know what her deal is. What are you doing? So, anyways, everybody, happy coding. Bye.